The ribs smoked on the table, cornbread warm, sweet tea glistening, a Sunday dinner in my Fayetteville home, built with my own scarred hands. Then her voice, venomous as a snake's hiss, shattered it all. "You're a freeloader, leeching off us in our house." The words tore through me, each one a bayonet twisting in my gut, deeper than any wound from Vietnam's jungles. My fork crashed against the plate, the sound a gunshot in the suffocating silence. My son, my only son, stared at his beer, his cowardice a knife in my heart. The flag outside snapped in the wind, screaming betrayal louder than I ever could. My chest burned. My soul bled. The pain so raw I thought it'd kill me right there. I survived wars. But this was my breaking point. Yet I held it in, my rage a coiled spring. And this is how I fought back. Her words still burned in my ears, each syllable a fresh wound. Freeloader. The dining room was silent now, the ribs cold, the sweet tea untouched. I sat there, my army tattoo itching under my sleeve, a reminder of battles fought and won. I'm John Harper, 65 years old, a Vietnam and Desert Storm veteran who built this 2,500 square foot house in Fayetteville with my own sweat and a GI Bill loan 30 years ago. I raised my son, Michael, here after his mother passed, pouring every dollar from my VA checks into his college fund, his Little League uniforms, his dreams. I thought I'd raised a man who'd honor that. But Michael, 38, logistics manager, sat across from me, his eyes glued to that beer bottle, spineless as a jellyfish. His wife, Sarah, 35, with her sharp suits and sharper tongue, stood up, her heels clicking on my oak floors. "We're done cleaning up after you," she snapped, tossing her napkin like it was my dignity. I didn't answer. In the Army, you learn silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. I remembered Michael at 10, saluting me in his baseball cap, calling me his hero. Now, he let Sarah's venom flow unchecked. She'd been at it for months, griping about my old Army duffel in the garage, my useless VA pension eating their budget. "This is our house now," she'd said last week, her voice dripping with ownership. My house. My blood paid for every inch of this land. My fingers tightened around the chair's armrest, the wood creaking under my grip. I saw it now. Sarah wanted me gone, and Michael, my own flesh, was too weak to stop her. The pain wasn't just her words, it was his betrayal, a knife twisting deeper than any I'd felt in war. But I'd survived ambushes before. I'd survived this one too. The dining room felt like a tomb now, the air heavy with the sting of Sarah's words and Michael's silence. I pushed back my chair, the scrape against the oak floor like a cry I couldn't let out. Without a word, I walked through the house I'd built, past the framed photos of my Army days, past the flag folded in a glass case from a buddy who never made it back from Da Nang. My boots echoed on the stairs, each step a reminder of the 2,500 square feet I'd poured my life into. I headed to my workshop in the garage, my sanctuary, where the smell of sawdust and gun oil clung to the air like a memory of better days. The door creaked shut behind me, sealing out the world that had turned against me. In the dim light of a single bulb, I stood surrounded by relics of my service. A Purple Heart medal, scratched from years of handling. A faded photo of my platoon, half of them gone before the war ended. My old Army issue watch, its steady tick a heartbeat in the silence. I sank onto a stool, my hands trembling as I gripped the workbench. Sarah's voice echoed in my skull. Freeloader. It wasn't just an insult, it was a blade, carving away everything I'd fought for. I'd survived ambushes in Vietnam, sandstorms in Desert Storm, nights when the screams of the wounded haunted my sleep. But this betrayal from my own son felt like a wound no medic could stitch. I thought of Michael at 6, his tiny hand clutching mine at the Fort Bragg 4th of July parade, his eyes wide as he waved a flag, shouting, "That's my dad!" I'd worked double shifts at the mill, 12 hours a day, to pay off this house, to give him a life without want. When his mother died, I held him through the nights, he cried, promising I'd always be there. Now, at 38, he sat silent while his wife gutted me. Last night, after dinner, he'd followed me to the hallway, his voice low, hesitant. "Dad, maybe a VA home would be better. You'd have care, and we'd have space." Space! The word hit like a mortar round. My own son wanted me out of the home I'd built, the home where his mother's laughter still lingered in the walls. I picked up the Purple Heart, its cold metal heavy in my palm. "I took shrapnel for this country," I whispered to no one, my voice cracking. "I carried men out of firefights, buried friends, and built this life for you. And now I'm a burden?" Tears burned my eyes, not for Sarah's cruelty, she was a stranger in my story, but for Michael's betrayal. The boy who'd once drawn me as a superhero in his school notebook now saw me as dead weight. The pain was a vice around my chest, squeezing until I could barely breathe. I'd faced death in war, but this was worse. This was my heart breaking. Piece by piece, in the house I'd made a fortress for my family. Outside, thunder rumbled, a storm rolling in over Fayetteville. The workshop's window rattled, and I saw my reflection. A 65-year-old man, lines etched deep from years of sacrifice, eyes hollow with a grief I couldn't name. I remembered my wife, Ellen, her soft hands brushing flour off her apron as she baked cornbread in this very kitchen. "You're our rock, John," she'd said. What would she think now, seeing her son turn his back on me? The thought was a knife, twisting deeper. I clutched the watch, its tick relentless, mocking me. "I'm no freeloader," I said aloud, my voice shaking with rage and sorrow. "This is my home. My blood paid for it." Sarah's voice drifted from the house, sharp and careless on the phone. "He's just an old man, taking up space. We'll get him out soon." Each word was a fresh cut, but Michael's silence in the background hurt worse. He didn't argue, didn't defend me. I set the metal down, my hand steadying as the pain hardened into something else resolve. I'd survived wars by waiting, watching, striking when the moment was right. This was no different. The storm outside grew louder, rain hammering the roof like gunfire. I stood, my shadow stretching across the workbench. The pain was unbearable, but it wasn't the end. It was the spark. I'd show them who John Harper really was. The rain battered the workshop roof, each drop a drumbeat echoing the war in my chest. I stood there, the Purple Heart cold in my hand, its weight anchoring me to the truth. I wasn't the freeloader Sarah branded me. I was John Harper, 65, a Vietnam and Desert Storm veteran who'd built this 2,500-square-foot Fayetteville home with calloused hands and a GI Bill loan. Her words, "We'll get him out soon," still burned. But the pain was forging something new, resolve. In the Army, I learned you don't charge into battle blind. You wait, you watch, you strike when the enemy's weak. Sarah and Michael thought my silence was surrender. They were wrong. It was recon, the first step in a fight I'd been trained for decades ago. I set the metal down and moved to the steel lockbox under the workbench, its surface scratched from years of guarding my life's proof. My fingers, steady now, turned the key. Inside were the deeds to this house, paid off with 30 years of sweat, bank statements showing every VA check I'd cashed to keep Michael fed, clothed, educated, and a yellowed photo of me and Ellen smiling in this very garage when we first moved in. These weren't just papers, they were my armor, my ammunition. I pulled out the deed, its embossed seal catching the dim light. "This is mine," I whispered, my voice low but firm, like a command I'd given in the field. Sarah wanted to erase me, but these documents screamed the truth louder than her venom ever could. I grabbed my old Army-issue phone, the kind built to survive a war zone, and dialed Tom Reynolds, my buddy from the 82nd Airborne, now a lawyer 2 miles down Ramsey Street. His voice crackled through, steady as ever. "John, you sound like you're planning something." I didn't mince words. "Sarah called me a freeloader. Michael wants me in a VA home. They're after the house." Tom's pause was heavy. Then he growled, "They've got some nerve. That house is yours, brother, legally, morally, every damn way. They can't touch it without your signature." I nodded, though he couldn't see. "I need leverage, Tom, something ironclad." He chuckled, a sound like gravel. "Give me 2 days. I'll draft a trust that'll lock this place down tighter than Fort Bragg's armory." I hung up, my pulse steadying. In Vietnam, we'd wait in the jungle, silent, eyes sharp, until the moment was right. This was no different. I opened a notebook, one I'd used to log patrol routes in Desert Storm, and started documenting. Every snide remark from Sarah, "Your VA checks are bleeding us dry," she'd sneered, last month went down in ink. I saved her voicemails, her voice dripping with contempt. "He's just dead weight, Michael." Each word was a bullet I'd fire back when the time came. I thought of Michael, my boy, who once carved "Dad's my hero" into this workbench with a pocket knife. Now he was complicit, his silence a betrayal sharper than Sarah's words. But I wasn't fighting just for me. I was fighting for the man I'd raised him to be. The rain slowed, but the air in the workshop stayed thick, heavy with the scent of oil and wood. I walked to the window, watching the American flag outside sag under the storm's weight. Sarah's voice drifted from the house again, sharp on the phone. "The bank's ready, but we need him to sign. He's too old to fight us." Michael's murmur followed, too soft to hear, but his lack of protest was deafening. I clenched my fists, the knuckles white, scarred from years of gripping rifles and hammers. They thought I was a relic, a shadow to be swept aside, but I'd survived ambushes by staying calm, calculating. I'd do it again. I sat back at the workbench, the lockbox open, its contents a fortress of truth. Tom's words echoed, "They can't touch it." I traced the deed's edges, my resolve hardening like steel in a forge. Sarah and Michael had underestimated me, but I was no stranger to war. This was my home, my legacy, paid for with blood and sacrifice. The storm outside faded, but another was brewing inside me. I closed the notebook, its pages now a battle plan. My silence wasn't weakness, it was the calm before the strike. And when it came, they'd learn what a veteran's resolve could do. The morning sun cut through the haze over Fayetteville, casting long shadows across my front yard where the American flag hung proud, its stars faded but unyielding. I stood in my workshop, the lockbox of deeds and memories still open, its contents a silent vow that I, John Harper, 65, wasn't the freeloader Sarah claimed. Her words from last night's call, "He's too old to fight us," echoed like a challenge. But in the Army, I learned battles aren't won alone. Allies matter. And in this small town near Fort Bragg, where veterans are family, I wasn't as alone as Sarah thought. I grabbed my old Army cap, its 82nd Airborne patch worn but bold, and headed out. The fight was on, and it was time to rally my own. I drove 2 miles down Bragg Boulevard to the VFW Post 91, a squat brick building where the air smelled of coffee and camaraderie. Inside, the walls were lined with photos of soldiers, some smiling, some gone, and a jukebox hummed "Sweet Home Alabama." Old comrades, gray-haired but sharp-eyed, greeted me with firm handshakes. Carl Bennett, A grizzled Marine who'd hauled me out of a ditch in Nam clapped my shoulder. "Heard what's going on, John," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "Your daughter-in-law's telling folks you're living off her dime, eating up their savings. She's got no clue who she's messing with." I nodded, my jaw tight. "She thinks this town's hers to spin. She's wrong." Carl leaned in, his eyes glinting. "We know you built that 2,500 square foot house with your GI Bill, paid every mortgage with your VA checks. You're no burden, you're a damn pillar." The room stirred. A younger vet, still in his Desert Storm fatigues, raised a beer. "To John Harper," he called, "the man who carried us all." Glasses clinked. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight of betrayal lift, replaced by the strength of brothers in arms. Carl lowered his voice. "Word's spreading, John. The diner on Main Street's buzzing. Neighbors saw Sarah at the bank, pushing for a loan, claiming your house as collateral. They're starting to talk. Her lies don't hold up here." I gripped my coffee mug, the warmth grounding me. "Let them talk," I said. "Truth's louder than her noise." Back home, the air was thick with tension. Sarah was in the kitchen, her heels clicking like warning shots as she spoke on the phone. "Yes, we'll get the papers signed," she snapped, unaware I was in the doorway. "He's just an old man taking up space." Michael sat at the table, his face pale, his hands fidgeting with a napkin. He didn't look up, didn't challenge her. I stayed silent, my army watch ticking in my pocket, each second a reminder of my plan. But then the doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected. Sarah froze, her phone clattering to the counter. I opened the door to find Maggie Carter, Sarah's mother, standing there, her gray hair pulled tight, her eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen since Ellen was alive. "John," Maggie said, stepping inside, her voice steady but sharp. "I need a word with my daughter." Sarah's face flushed, but Maggie didn't wait. "I heard what you said at dinner, Sarah, calling John a freeloader in the house he built. Shame on you. My parents raised us to respect those who served, who sacrificed. You're tarnishing our name." Sarah's lips parted, but no words came. "Mom, you don't understand," she stammered. Maggie cut her off. "I understand enough. John carried this family when you were still in diapers. You don't get to erase that." Michael's head sank lower, his silence a heavier betrayal than ever. Maggie turned to me, her voice softening. "If you need me, John, I'll stand with you. Always." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you, Maggie." As she left, the air shifted, like the calm before a firefight. Sarah stormed to the living room, her voice rising. "You're turning everyone against us," she hissed at me. I met her gaze, calm as stone. "I don't need to turn anyone, Sarah. The truth's doing that for me." She flinched, her confidence cracking. Outside, I heard a neighbor's truck rumble by, the driver waving a small gesture, but it carried weight. Fayetteville was watching, and its veterans, its people, were choosing sides. My watch ticked louder now, its rhythm a war drum. Sarah and Michael thought they held the high ground, but they didn't know this town, this community, like I did. The VFW, Maggie, the whispers at the diner, they were my squad, my backup. And in war, you don't win without allies. The Fayetteville sun hung low, painting my front yard in shades of amber, the American flag casting a long shadow across the porch of my 2,500 square foot home. Inside, the air crackled with tension, Sarah's heels striking the oak floor like a metronome of war. I, John Harper, 65, a Vietnam and Desert Storm veteran, stood in the doorway of my workshop, my army watch ticking steadily in my pocket. The support of my VFW brothers and Maggie Carter's fierce words still echoed, a reminder that I wasn't fighting alone. But Sarah and Michael didn't know that yet. They thought they could bully me out of my own home, erase my legacy with their lies. Their confidence was crumbling, and I could smell their desperation like gunpowder before a firefight. In the kitchen, Sarah paced, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice sharp as shrapnel. "We need that loan now," she snapped, unaware I was listening from the hall. "Just tell the bank we'll get his signature. He's old, he'll cave." Her words were a slap, but I stayed silent, my hand resting on the workshop doorframe, steady as a sniper's aim. Michael sat at the table, his shoulders hunched, his fingers shredding a napkin into confetti. "Sarah, maybe we should slow down," he muttered, his voice barely audible over her tirade. "This feels wrong." She spun on him, her eyes blazing. "Wrong? What's wrong is your father squatting in our house, draining our future." Michael flinched, his gaze dropping to the floor, his silence a fresh wound in my chest. My boy, who once carved "Dad's my hero" into my workbench, was buckling under her weight. I stepped into the kitchen, my boots heavy on the floor. Sarah's head snapped up, her phone clattering to the counter. "Eavesdropping now?" she sneered, her arms crossed tight. I met her gaze, my voice low, measured. "I don't need to eavesdrop, Sarah. Your lies are loud enough." Her face flushed, but she didn't back down. "We're trying to build a life here, and you're in the way. Sign the papers, or we'll make this harder than it needs to be." My watch ticked louder, its rhythm a steady drumbeat. "Harder?" I said, my tone cold as steel. "I survived, Da Nang. You think you scare me?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. Michael's eyes darted between us, his hands trembling, but he said nothing, his silence cutting deeper than her threats. The next morning, I drove 3 miles to the First Citizens Bank on Bragg Boulevard, where the manager, Bill Thornton, a Gulf War vet with a limp from a roadside bomb, greeted me with a nod. "Heard about your trouble, John," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Your daughter-in-law's been pushing for a loan, claiming your house is theirs." I shut it down. I raised an eyebrow. "Why's that?" Bill's eyes hardened. "I served with men like you. I know what you gave for that house. They don't get to rewrite your story." I nodded, gratitude warming my chest. "Appreciate it, Bill." He slid a folder across the desk. "They tried forging your signature. I flagged it. Without you, they've got nothing." My jaw tightened. Forgery. Sarah's desperation was spiraling, and Michael was letting it happen. Back home, the tension was a live wire. Sarah stormed into the living room, her face pale, a crumpled bank letter in her fist. "You went to the bank, didn't you?" she shouted, her voice cracking. "You're sabotaging us." I sat in my old recliner, the one she'd mocked as junk, and looked up calmly. "I didn't sabotage you, Sarah. You did that yourselves." She threw the letter at my feet, its words stark. "Loan denied." Michael stood in the doorway, his face ashen, his tie loose. "Dad, why can't you just help us?" he pleaded, his voice breaking. I stood, my shadow stretching across the room. "Help you steal what I bled for? You're my son, Michael, but you've forgotten what honor means." He recoiled, shame flickering in his eyes, but Sarah grabbed his arm. "Don't listen to him," she hissed. "He's just a bitter old man." That night, I overheard them in their bedroom, their voices leaking through the thin walls of my home. "We're running out of time," Sarah said, her tone frantic. "The bank's closing in, and he's turning the town against us." Michael's voice was weary. "Maybe we pushed too far." Sarah's response was a whip crack. "Too far? This is our future, Michael. If he won't sign, we'll find another way." I sat in my workshop, the lockbox open, my notebook filled with their words, their lies. My watch ticked relentlessly, each second a step closer to their unraveling. Sarah's threats were growing wilder, but desperation makes you sloppy. I'd seen it in war soldiers who panicked lost. I wasn't panicking. I was preparing, my allies at the VFW and Bill at the bank tightening the noose. Sarah and Michael thought they could outmaneuver me, but they didn't know the first rule of battle. Never underestimate a veteran with everything to lose. The Fayetteville sky burned orange as the sun dipped low, casting a glow over the VFW Post 91's annual barbecue, a half-acre lot draped in American flags and filled with the scent of smoked brisket and cornbread. I, John Harper, 65, a Vietnam and Desert Storm veteran, stood among my brothers in arms, my Army watch ticking like a pulse in my pocket. The support of Carl, Maggie, and Bill Thornton had steeled me, but Sarah's lies, "He's a freeloader, draining our future," still festered like an open wound. Tonight, that wound would bleed in public. The town was buzzing, whispers of Sarah's schemes spreading like wildfire through the diner, the bank, the streets near Fort Bragg. She thought she could rewrite my story, but Fayetteville's veterans don't forget their own. I gripped my Purple Heart, tucked in my jacket, and stepped into the crowd, ready for battle. The pavilion hummed with laughter, kids running with sparklers, veterans swapping stories over beer. Sarah and Michael arrived late, her heels clicking on the gravel, her smile as fake as a politician's promise. She worked the crowd, shaking hands, her voice syrupy. "We're just trying to fix up the house, but John's holding us back." Her words were a spark in dry grass, but the crowd's eyes flickered to me, their silence heavy with doubt. Michael stood behind her, his face pale, his hands stuffed in his pockets like a kid caught stealing. I stayed quiet, my boots planted firm, waiting for the moment to strike. Then Maggie Carter stepped forward, her gray hair glinting under the string lights, her voice cutting through the chatter like a drill sergeant's command. "Sarah, that's enough," she said, her eyes blazing. "You called John a freeloader in the house he built with his GI Bill, paid for with his blood. You're shaming a veteran who carried this town on his back." The crowd stilled, forks pausing mid-air, beers set down. Sarah's smile froze, her face flushing red. "Mom, you don't know the whole story," she stammered. But Maggie didn't flinch. "I know you're lying to these good people, telling them John's a burden. He's the man who rebuilt this community after the mill closed, who paid Michael's tuition with his VA checks." A murmur rippled through the crowd, veterans nodding, their wives whispering. Carl, the Marine who'd saved me in Nam, stepped up, his voice booming. "John Harper's no freeloader. He's a hero. That house? Every one of its 2,500 square feet is his, earned with 30 years of sacrifice." The crowd erupted, clapping, some shouting, "Hoo-ah!" the Army's battle cry. My chest tightened, not with pain, but pride. Sarah's eyes darted, her confidence crumbling like sand. "You're all twisting this," she snapped, her voice shrill. I stepped forward, my Purple Heart glinting as I pulled it from my jacket. The crowd hushed. "This house," I said, my voice steady as a rifle's aim, "was paid for with my blood, my sweat, my years in Vietnam and Desert Storm. I carried men out of firefights, buried friends, and built a home for my son. You don't get to call me a freeloader in it." My words landed like mortar rounds, each one shaking Sarah's facade. Michael's head dropped, his shoulders shaking, shame written in every line of his face. The crowd surged forward, veterans saluting, their wives offering me nods of respect. Sarah grabbed Michael's arm, her voice a hiss. "We're leaving." They fled to their car, gravel crunching under their feet, the crowd's cheers drowning out her protests. I stood there, the flag behind me snapping in the evening breeze, my watch ticking like a heartbeat. Maggie touched my arm, her voice soft. "You did good, John. They see you now." I nodded, my throat tight. The VFW barbecue, this half-acre of shared history, had become my battlefield, and I'd won the first round without raising my voice. Sarah's lies were exposed, her narrative shattered in front of Fayetteville's heart. But this wasn't the end. Michael's silence, his failure to defend me, still stung deeper than Sarah's words. I slipped the Purple Heart back into my jacket, its weight a reminder of what I'd fought for and what I'd fight for still. The crowd's cheers faded, but their support burned bright, a fire that would carry me to the final reckoning. Sarah and Michael thought they could outrun the truth, but in this town, truth runs faster. The air in my Fayetteville home was thick, the silence heavier than the humid night outside. The VFW barbecue had stripped Sarah's lies bare, leaving her and Michael reeling, their plans crumbling like a poorly built bunker. I, John Harper, 65, a Vietnam and Desert Storm veteran, sat in my workshop, the lockbox open, its contents deeds, Virginia records, my notebook of Sarah's venom spread across the workbench like a war map. My army watch ticked relentlessly, each second a reminder that time was my ally now. Sarah's desperate threats and Michael's cowardly silence had pushed me to this moment. The town, Carl, Maggie, Bill at the bank had rallied behind me, but this fight wasn't over. Tonight, in my 2,500 square foot home, built with my sweat and GI Bill, I'd deliver the final blow. I heard Sarah's heels before I saw her, clicking down the hall like a countdown to detonation. She burst into the workshop, her face pale, her eyes wild with fury. "You think you've won?" she spat, slamming a bank notice on the workbench, its words stark. "Loan denied, ownership contested. You turned this town against us, poisoned everyone." Her voice trembled, but I stayed calm, my hands steady as I closed the lockbox. "I didn't poison anyone, Sarah," I said, my tone low, like a commander before a strike. "You did that when you called me a freeloader in my own home." She stepped closer, her finger jabbing the air. "We'll sue you, take everything. You're just an old man clinging to a house you don't deserve." My watch ticked louder, its rhythm my anchor. "Deserve?" I said, my voice cutting like a bayonet. "I earned this house with 30 years of blood and sacrifice. What have you earned?" Michael appeared in the doorway, his tie undone, his face drawn like a soldier after a lost battle. "Dad, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "We just wanted a future." I stood, my shadow stretching across the room, and pulled a notarized folder from the lockbox Tom Reynolds' work, a trust securing my home for a veteran's charity. I slid it across the workbench, its weight final. "Open it," I said. Sarah's hands shook as she tore it open, her eyes scanning the legal text. The house, the land, all 2,500 square feet locked in a trust for the Wounded Warrior Project, untouchable by her or Michael, even after I'm gone. Her breath caught, her face draining of color. You gave it away?" she stammered. "To strangers?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "Not strangers. To men and women who know sacrifice, who understand honor, something this house has forgotten." Michael sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, I'm sorry," he choked out. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I let her poison me." His words were a knife, twisting in my chest, not because they surprised me, but because they came too late. I knelt beside him, my voice steady but heavy. "You're my son, Michael, but you chose silence over honor. You sat there while she called me worthless, while she tried to steal what I bled for. That's a wound you'll carry, not me." Sarah's voice broke into a scream. "You're heartless. You'd rather ruin us than help your own family." I stood, my Purple Heart glinting in my hand. "Heartless? I gave you a home, a life. You spat on it. This is justice, Sarah, not cruelty." Tom Reynolds stepped into the room, his lawyer's briefcase in hand, his eyes sharp as they'd been in the 82nd Airborne. "It's over," he said, his voice calm but ironclad. "The trust is airtight. The house is John's, now and always. You've got no claim, no leverage." Sarah's hands trembled, her fury collapsing into desperation. "We'll fight this," she hissed, but her voice wavered, hollow. Tom shook his head. "You've got nothing, Sarah. The bank, the town, even your own mother, they see you now." Michael's sobs filled the silence, his head bowed, his hands clutching the floor. I looked at him, my heart aching for the boy who once saluted me at Little League games, now broken by his own choices. I walked to the workshop window, the Fayetteville night dark beyond the glass, the flag outside still waving. "You thought my silence was weakness," I said, turning to face them. "But it was patience, the kind I learned in war. I let you dig your own grave, and now you're lying in it." Sarah's eyes widened, her defiance shattered. Michael looked up, his face wet with regret, but I had no words left for him. The fight was done. My watch ticked on, its rhythm a victory march. They tried to erase me, but I was the foundation of this house, unmovable, unbreakable. The Fayetteville dawn broke soft, painting my porch in hues of gold, the American flag rippling gently in the breeze. I, John Harper, 65, a Vietnam and Desert Storm veteran, stood there, my Army watch ticking in my hand, its steady rhythm no longer a burden but a release. The storm of Sarah's lies and Michael's betrayal had passed, leaving my 2,500 square-foot home quiet, its walls holding the echoes of my victory. Sarah had retreated to her room, her defiance shattered. Michael sat alone in the kitchen, his regret a weight he'd carry for years. I'd secured my legacy, locking this house in a trust for veterans who understood sacrifice. My heart ached for the boy Michael once was, but I'd fought for my honor and I'd won. I thought of Ellen, my wife, her laughter once filling these rooms. She'd always said, "Patience, John. Truth wins." She was right. To my fellow veterans, hear this. Your sacrifices aren't forgotten. Stand tall. Hold your ground. Let silence be your shield until the truth becomes your sword. This house, my legacy, stands for that. If this story stirred you, please like, comment, and subscribe to GI Dad's Family Drama. Share your story below. What's your fight for honor? Let's stand together.